Okay. All right, it's 7:01. I mean, you know, let's do this.
All right, let's hit it.
My name is Farrell Carfield, and I am the convening coordinator of the Alliance for Interracial Dignity, which really means we have a lot of leaders of this organization, but I try to do the legwork to keep us all moving. Really excited that you all are here with us tonight to celebrate Black History Month, Webster Grove style, with local history buff Keita Quinn, among other hats she wears. I have actually quite a few announcements that I want to get in here before we get to our program. I am going to put a bunch of links in the chat that I'm about to talk through, and I'll try to keep it brief. First of all, again, I wanted to note we're recording the meeting just so that, you know, when you're speaking, you know you're getting recorded. This time we wanted to do that because we're going to try to share this after the fact. I wanted to let you all know that the Webster University DEI conference is coming up on March 1st and 2nd, that Vincent Fluellen and his team put on. They have a really cool lineup, including Olympic gold medalist Lori Hernandez. And I'm super excited to hear St. Louisans Rebecca Bennett and Reverend Tracy Blackman. So great speakers, and it's free. You do have to register, and that's why I put that link in the chat. But it is free and open to the public. You don't have to have any connection to the university, and it's really good every year. So check that out. I also wanted to share that that Metropolitan Congregations United is doing a Truth and Education rally this Saturday to get the Missouri legislature's attention and stand up against bills that would limit accurate and inclusive teaching of history. That's going to be at U City High School from 11 to 12 this Saturday. Like I said, I put the link in the chat. And then if you're interested in getting involved with that fight in a more sustained way, I urge you to check out, a lot of you probably already know about these guys, but Missouri Education Equity Partnership has really been leading the charge there. And it's good to connect with their work so that you can follow and figure out how to help out. They're planning a, what do you call it in Jeff City when you do a whole day of advocacy coming up in March as well. Then a reminder that the Alliance for Interracial Dignity is celebrating its 10-year anniversary on April 12th. You're all welcome, and please spread the word. We encourage people who've never even been to a meeting to use that as a chance to connect and get to know this organization. It's going to be at Eden Seminary. And again, that's April 12th. And we are going to, instead of asking vendors to donate food and decor and DJ, we are going to spend some money at Black-owned businesses. So we are going to fundraise to do that. So if anybody wants to donate to help make that celebration possible and help give business, then the link to the Alliance's PayPal account is in the chat. So thanks for your patience, and let's get to the really good stuff. I'm so excited that Keita is willing to help us put on our February program again. She's been involved with the Alliance a long time, but last year she knocked it out of the park teaching us about Benny Gordon's activism and what it took to get the Webster Groves pool integrated. And people are still talking about that program. Keita is a esteemed member of the Webster Groves School District Board of Education, and she's also on the board for the Webster Groves Historical Society. And I can't wait to see all the stories that she's gathered for us tonight. And I think she's also going to introduce that we have some special guests with us. So take it away, Keita.
Thank you, Farrell. Thank you to the members of the Alliance, and thank you all for joining us this evening. For those of us in St. Louis, I can't think of a better way to spend a cold, snowy evening. Just a little background on this project. I started a business digitizing old photos And I just really enjoy looking at them. To me, they're like moments frozen in time. And I get really fascinated with the stories and the history that they hold. Um, I've come across several old band photos from Douglas School. Either both of my uncles were in the band, friends of the family's parents were in the band. My sister, who you will meet later, was in the band at Steger when Steger was a junior high. But every time I would mention these band photos and I would mention Mr. Walter Lathen, who was the band director in Webster, he was at Douglas, and then after the schools integrated, he went to Steger Junior High and then to high school. Every time I mention Mr. Lathen, I mean, it's just followed by just admiration and respect. He was just such a well-respected gentleman. And the same for Willie Akins. Willie Akins happened to be one of Mr. Lathen's students. And then he became a jazz saxophone guru in his own right. And he also became a music educator. They were both excellent teachers, and I wanted to focus on teacher excellence because I think it's important for us to remember. I mean, we're in a strange spot right now with education and people and political blah, blah, blah. But I just wanted to remind people how important teachers are and what kind of effect they can actually have on students' lives. So I put together two quick little short to me videos, one about Mr. Lathen and one about Willie Akins. We're going to watch about Mr. Lathen first, and then after that, I will introduce a couple of his students that we have in the audience waiting to share their stories.
All right. Okay, here's the part where you guys all cross your fingers. So I'm going to share the video, and make sure your volume's up because I think it plays, at not a super loud level. And we'll pull it up. Much of the following valuable history was recorded by two local historians, longtime resident Henrietta Ambrose and archivist Ann Morris. The pictures and stories gathered by Ambrose and Morris bring North Webster fully back to life for modern readers. Tonight we honor Morris and Ambrose's work by delving deeper into one aspect of the story, exceptional music teachers that put North Webster and many of its young people on the map. It's important to note that Henrietta Ambrose was the first African American elected to the Webster Grove City Council. Her husband, Walter Ambrose, was the first African American elected to the Webster Grove School Board, and for whom the Ambrose Preschool in Webster is named.
Douglas School, established in 1866, was the first public school in the area, 30 years before the founding of the city of Webster Groves. Named after abolitionist Frederick Douglass, a name that was suggested by the students, the school served North Webster, an area which had been settled by many black families after the Civil War. Douglass was first an elementary school, but in 1925, when the Webster Grove School District decided to stop paying tuition for students to attend the all-black Sumner High School, which was miles away in St. Louis City, Douglass was expanded into a high school. Douglass High School was the only accredited public high school for African American students in St. Louis County until the end of segregation in 1957. Douglass was known for its excellent teachers who went above and beyond for their students and who were embraced by the community. One such teacher was Mr. Walter S. Lathen, Jr. Walter S. Lathen Jr. grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. For his freshman and sophomore years, he attended Charles H. Sumner High School, the first high school for African American students west of the Mississippi River. While at Sumner, he studied violin with Carl Toll, a violinist with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. For his junior and senior years, he moved to Monterey, California, and attended Union High School, While at Union High, he learned how to play the bass horn. Lathen played horn in the school band and violin in the school orchestra. Here's how Mr. Lathen describes his start as a musician in the book, edited by Ann Morris, Lift Every Voice and Sing, St. Louis African Americans in the 20th Century. I came back to St. Louis and I enrolled at Lincoln University. I wanted to pursue a music education degree, but unfortunately, Lincoln University's music department was not capable of providing a full degree in music. As a matter of fact, I did more playing in the prison band than I did at the university, because the university did not have a band. While I was a student at Lincoln, I stayed with C.G. Williams, who taught the prisoners at the institution in Jefferson City. The black prisoners had a band, and I would go with Mr. Williams when he taught the band on Tuesday or Wednesday night, and I played in the band. On Sundays, the prisoner gave a concert in the park, and I played with them. After a year of this, I realized I was not getting what I wanted from Lincoln University, so I transferred to the University of Illinois.
After graduating college, Lathen got a job in Cairo, Illinois as the music supervisor for the African American schools there. In 1940, Lathen got recruited by the Douglas principal, Mr. Howell B. Goins. Under his tutelage, the music program really took off. He created a 60-piece band which received high honors at state music festivals. His students practiced often, and the PTA chartered buses for the band to travel to the music festivals. Lathen, along with Mr. Kenneth Billups, also worked with the Douglas Choir. Billups wrote the Douglas Fight Song, which is Hail to Douglas. According to Miss Ambrose, Billups would later go on to become a choral director for the St. Louis Symphony. Many music teachers also moonlighted as jazz musicians with local bands. Mr. Lathen was no exception. He played with several popular St. Louis jazz bands like Jeter Pittler's Orchestra, as well as Eddie Randall and the Blue Devils. In the late 1950s, Mr. Lathen started playing with the George Hudson Orchestra. According to Mr. Lathen, the George Hudson Orchestra was the most popular band in St. Louis at the time. Lathen played with George Hudson for 27 years. Mr. Lathen remembered playing at clubs, several large universities, a lot of political events, as well as opening for some St. Louis Hawks basketball games, and even playing during the NBA All-Star Game, hosted in St. Louis. Mr. Lathen was a member of a Black Musicians Union, Local 197. In Lift Every Voice and Sing, he recalled, I played with Count Basie and some of the other big-time musicians that came in and needed a bass player. They would call the Black Musicians Union and request a bass player who knew how to read music. I played with Nancy Wilson, Lou Rawls, and the Mills Brothers. During his time with Eddie Randall's band, he played with a then little-known jazz trumpeter named Miles Davis. Mr. Lathen recalls meeting Miles while visiting fellow music teacher named Elwood Buchanan at a junior high in East St. Louis. Mr. Buchanan had one of his students play with Mr. Lathen. Mr. Lathen said he put his trumpet up to his mouth, put the mute in there, and played the trumpet solo Tuxedo Junction by Erskine Hawkins. Didn't miss a note. I said, "Who is this?" Mr. Buchanan said, "This is Miles Davis."
Walter Lathen Jr. dedicated about 40 years to Webster Grove students. He especially loved his time at Douglas and held the other teachers and staff there in high regard. After the schools desegregated in 1956, he went on to teach at Steger Junior High and at the high school. He was one of the directors of the Webster High Symphonic Band and the sole director of the dance band, which was extremely popular. Mr. Lathen enjoyed teaching and was well respected by everyone. He had a no-nonsense reputation with an expectation of nothing less than excellence from his students. In Lift Every Voice and Sing, he said, I enjoyed teaching very much. I could see that I was doing something to help the youngsters, and that was my primary object. The background music you've been enjoying are tracks from an album Mr. Lathen had recorded of the Steger Junior High Band in the mid-1970s. Thanks to retired band director Mr. Dane Williams, it was found in a closet at Steger and has now been digitized and shared with the district alumni office to live on in infamy. The time, effort, and love that Mr. Lathen poured into his students is apparent. One of Lathen's prodigies from Webster High was Andrew Glover. While a sophomore, Glover created the Circus Band, a wind instrument ensemble, and made his first band arrangement, which they played. In college, he joined the Detroit Concert Band and played with them for 4 seasons, including performing with them on numerous recording sessions. Glover went on to work as an educator, performer, conductor, clinician, and composer-arranger. He has over 200 band works under his belt. He taught briefly in Webster and currently serves as the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of C.L. Barnhouse Company. Mr. Glover arranged this song, In the Garden, by C. Austin Miles, and dedicated the arrangement to Mr. Lathen.
I love how you snuck in the fact that we were listening to that music. That is so cool.
You're welcome. Well, we are lucky enough to have 2 of Mr. Lathen's students with us, one of them being Mr. Andrew Glover. Andrew, are you here? I can't see everyone.
I am here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
I'm great. How are
Welcome.
you?
I hope you're not too mad at us using your high school pictures.
a lot of years ago.
Um, I wanted to invite you on to share the story that you shared with me about how Mr. Lathen helped you get your start in music.
All right. I want to say just at the start, looking at all those pictures of Mr. Lathen and hearing all those things is a little emotional for me because of how important he was to me in my life. And, you know, when I first joined the band at Steger and when he first started me in band, you know, I didn't know these things about him. I didn't know that he was a professional musician who played with all of these legendary musicians. I didn't understand the things he'd gone through as a Black musician in St. Louis and teaching before schools were integrated. I didn't know these things, and you know, I found them out later. But he was just such a huge influence on my life. I went into a career in music. I became a musician and became a professional musician, and it all started because of Walter Lathen. I went through the Webster schools. I had an older brother who was 3 years ahead of me. And my brother Rick played in the band. He was a French horn player, and he went to Steger. And during his 9th grade year, I was in the 6th grade. Rick was at Steger, I was at Hudson. Next year, he was going to go to the high school. I was going to go to Steger. And the band had a band picnic that year. That was the same year that the band made the record that Keita found and was playing in the background there for a while. And the band picnic was held in my grandparents' backyard. They had a huge backyard with a big grill. And so I was at the band picnic because it was my grandparents' house, and I went there after school most afternoons. And I wasn't in the band because I didn't go to Steger yet. And everybody in the band loved Mr. Lathen. He was just the kind of teacher that the students just adored. He was not an easy teacher. He made people work hard, but he was just universally loved. I just can't explain it any differently than that. So they had this picnic, and they'd gotten a big cake for him. And it was a big sheet cake, and they had it all decorated with a musical staff. And for the little musical notes, Mr. Lathen loved Hershey bars, Hershey's chocolate. And they got those little Hershey's Kisses and use those for the musical notes on the staff on this cake. So it was a beautiful cake, and Mr. Lathen was cutting pieces of the cake for everybody in the band. And I wanted a piece of that cake. So I was kind of a shy kid, which I know is hard to believe now, but back then I was really shy. And finally I worked up the courage, and I went up to him and I asked Mr. Lathen if I could have a piece of his cake. And he didn't recognize me. And he said, "Well, who are you?" And I told him. And he said, "Are you Rick Glover's brother?" I said, "Yes, I am." "Where do you go to school?" "I go to Hudson, but I'm coming to Steger next year." "What instrument do you play?" I said, "Well, I don't play an instrument." And he looked at me, and in what I think was probably the most fateful moment of my life, he said, "I'll give you a piece of cake if you'll be in my band next year." And I looked at him, and I looked at that cake, and I thought to myself, this old guy isn't going to remember we had this conversation. So I said, "Sure." So he cut me a big piece of cake, and I got one of those Hershey's Kisses, and it was really delicious and all that. And so I was pretty happy about all that. So a few days later, my brother comes home from school, and he has an extra French horn. That's what my brother had played. And Rick said, "Mr. Lathen tells me to teach you how to play this summer." And I had no interest in playing the French horn whatsoever. And I said, "I'm not going to learn how to play that." And Rick, who knew better, said, "No, you said you were going to do this, so you better do this, and I'll show you." And to his credit, he tried all summer long to get me to learn how to play the French horn, but I wouldn't do it. So summer vacation ends and school starts, and I take this French horn back to Steger. I go down to the band room. Here's Mr. Lathen. And I said, "I have to give this back." And he says, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I didn't learn how to play it." And, you know, he looked like he was about 10 feet tall, but obviously he wasn't. And he looked down at me and he said, "We had a deal, young man. You agreed to be in my band for that piece of cake that I gave you." And I really felt miserable about, you know, the fact that he had remembered and I hadn't kept up my end of the deal. So I didn't really say anything. I was about to cry. And finally he said, "Well, come on, young man." And he takes me to the office. And I thought, good grief, I'm going to get suspended my first day of junior high. And he finds my guidance counselor and he transfers me out of band, second period, into instrumental music, third period. I didn't know what that was. So he said, come back third period. So I came back third period and he taught me French horn lessons one-on-one every day for about 2 months until I got caught up to where the rest of the band people were. They'd been playing for 2 years already and I was just starting new. And so he took that time out of his own schedule to teach me those lessons every day for a couple months to get me started in band. And I quickly developed a real love for being in band and a real love for music. And had it not been for Walter Lathen and that silly piece of cake, I have no idea what I'd be doing for a living. And so the fact that being a former band director myself, I know sometimes you have to kind of do some funny little tricks to get people to join band. And, I know that he had to do that a few times and that's what he did with me. But, I can't underestimate or overestimate the amount of importance that event has on my life. That one little serendipitous event changed the entire course of my life.
That's an awesome story. If I can, Anita, we have another student of Mr. Lathen's. Anita, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Right. So full disclosure, this is Dr. Anita Quinn. She is my big sister, who I love very much.
Love you too.
Anita was in the band that recorded this record that you guys heard. So I'm just going to throw it out there. By any chance, did you know Rick Glover and did you go to that band picnic?
I am sorry to say that I missed out on both meeting Mr. Glover and the band picnic. So yeah.
Okay.
Those sound exciting and
yeah. Well, that's okay. I wanted to ask you about your experience recording a record. Like, how did he announce that you guys were going to do a record? And then what was the experience like with Mr. Lathen recording that record?
Well, we had band every, I would say almost every afternoon when we were at Steger. And I have to say that was my most exciting and I don't know, kind of calming part of the day. So we went in one day for, what would have been a normal afternoon of music and band. And so he mentions to us that he wants to put together an album and have us record the album. And I thought, whoa, that's kind of heavy duty. I don't know if we're album ready yet. I was like, we were all kind of looking at each other like, oh my gosh, no pressure. So he told us that the time and date and that we would be recording the album in the evening on the stage there at Steger. And so, he said, make sure you bring everything that you need and what have you, and we will get it down and it will be all right. So we met that evening. I know it was right after dinner. I want to say it was around 5:30 or 6. We had a lot of music that we had in our, I guess you say, a repertoire. So he chose the songs for us to play. We had played those songs at assemblies there for the school. We marched one time in what used to be the Veil Prophet Parade downtown. So he just kind of picked out the ones that he thought we would do best in. So what you see on the album cover there, front and back, is what we spent the evening working on. And I have to say that at the time we were recording, anyone could have walked into the room and not been aware that we were recording an album. because I mean, obviously the sound equipment was there, but it just seemed like one of our regular band meetings. And we went through each song. Some of the songs we'd have to do over. But he was right. He's like, you all can do this. You've got it in you. Among other very, very inspirational things that, as Rick said, I mean, they just, Mr. Glover said that, they just stick with you for life, when someone believes in you that much. And when the album was finished, when that night was over, it took a little bit, but when we got the actual albums, they were in a white cover. And I mean, I remember a lot of us in the band being like, whoa, this is heavy duty stuff here. But we were proud. We were just as proud to take part in the recording of that music as we were to have, first and foremost, to have Mr. Lathen as our teacher. He has always been a part of my life that I am extremely proud of and will talk about to anyone who will listen. So thank you all very much for including the music in your presentation tonight. It brings back memories that just are overwhelming. And he was an awesome man.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Rick, I have another question for you. I'm Rick. Now you got me calling him Rick. Andrew.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's my bad. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Andrew.
My
If I can ask you to share one more story, and then if you guys don't mind, we'll may open it up to see if anyone else has any questions for you regarding Mr. Lathen or your time with him. Rick, you mentioned another thing that you felt was important about Mr. Lathen, about some tension that was at Steger. Would you mind? Did I call you Rick again, Andrew?
That's okay. I answered anything.
Sorry, would you mind sharing that?
No, I'd be happy to. So I was at Steger, I guess, in 1970, from 1973 to 1975. And there were problems back in those days at Steger. There were quite a few racially motivated incidents between students. There would be fights, there would be name calling, and just some pretty ugly stuff going on. And, I didn't really realize the importance of this at the time, but one thing I observed about Mr. Lathen was there was no color in the band room. We were all in the band together, and everybody respected each other, and Lord knows everybody respected him immensely. And I saw on several occasions where he had the ability to diffuse problems between students before they actually became a problem. He would see a couple of students, let's say one white and one black, starting to do some name calling and kind of getting a little physical with each other. And he would get between them and say things like, what's the matter with you two boys? Don't you have more respect for yourselves than to do this? And, why are you worried about what color his skin is? Why aren't you worried about the color of her hair? He was just so, he had this quality about him where he could just shut those things down before they became a big problem. And I just had such an impact on me, and I have carried that with me my whole life. And he was the absolute perfect person to be the band director at Steger in those days, because Steger was, like a lot of North Webster, there were a lot of black students, and there were also a lot of white students from Rock Hill and Glendale and, that area. So he was the perfect guy to do that. And, not directly related to the race issue, but just to touch on one more thing about the musical impact that he had. And when Anita talked about the record, he always played music in the band that he knew the students would enjoy playing. One of the things, and Anita may remember this, but when we would be in band or when we'd go out and play concerts for other school assemblies, he would often say, "This is your music. This is the music you hear on the radio." You know, he wasn't trying to, you know, burden us down with real heavy classical music or anything like that. He was, yes, he was teaching music, but he was also trying to deliver it on a level that the students would really enjoy, both playing and listening to. So he was a very smart guy in a lot of ways. But you know what, I lost track of him after I graduated from high school, and many years later, I really wanted to, I had assumed he had passed on because I thought he was old when I was a student, but you know, I got online and finally tracked him down and got in touch with him a couple of years before he passed away. And I was so happy to be able to get in touch with him and say thank you for all that he had done for me just a couple of years before he passed away. And to let him know what an impact his life had had on mine. And that's when he told me many stories of when he was working as a performing musician in St. Louis and East St. Louis, and some of the luminaries of the music world that he had worked with, and some of the challenges he had faced, you know, as a Black man and as a Black musician. And, you know, in the video, they mentioned the Black Musicians Union in St. Louis, and like almost everything in those days, you know, the musicians union was segregated. Local 2 was the white musicians and local 197 were the Black musicians. So, you know, he filled in a lot of gaps on that for me when I was very thankfully able to get in touch with him at the end of his life. He lived to be 99 years old. He had a very long and wonderful life. So I'm so thrilled that I got to say thank you to him because of what he meant to me.
Awesome. That's wow. Those are some very, very awesome words to speak about anybody. Farrell, I will defer to you. Should we wait in the interest of time? Should we wait for questions, for all questions?
You guys don't mind holding. I just want to make sure we get to both of our educators and then hopefully we'll have you know, some time to hear from folks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So sorry to interrupt. We'll try to get back to everything with Mr. Lathen. The next video is about Willie Akins. Some of you may know if you are familiar with the St. Louis jazz scene. Mr. Akins was also a student of Mr. Lathen's, and then he became a music educator himself. So. Another student of Walter Lathen's was Willie Akins. Willie Akins was known all over St. Louis as an outstanding saxophone player. We had the pleasure of sitting down with Mrs. Sandra Akins, Willie's wife. Here she will share about her husband's childhood, his love of music, and his excellence as a teacher.
Willie Akins was born in Webster Groves, Missouri in 1939 to Willie Akins Sr. and Odette Akins, who went by Betty. As a child, Betty gave Willie the nickname Winky.
Willie was about 7 years old. He had an ear infection, and you know, by the time that ear infection led to a slight stroke, and that slight stroke kind of twisted his mouth and his eye area, and you know, when his mom would look at him, it looked like he was always winking at her, you know, and so she called him Winky, and that just stood throughout his life. That's what she called her baby, Winky.
Willie's first music teacher at Douglas Elementary was Mr. Walter Lathen, and he started Willie out playing on a plastic flute called a tonette.
I think they were in the 4th grade about that time, and both of them was under Mr. Lathen, and they played around, and you know, Mr. Lathen was a no-nonsense type of band leader, and so he told them at the end of that year, don't come back, you know, y'all just played your whole year in my class, and I don't like that. If you're not serious about what you're gonna do, don't come back. But deep down in Willie's heart, he loved it. And so he practiced during the summer. And when he got back to school, he begged Mr. Lathen. He said, please, Mr. Lathen, I won't play in your class. He said, please let me come back, you know. And so at that time, Mr. Lathen had him playing clarinet. And he said, well, I don't have a position for you for the clarinet. He said, but if your daddy get you a saxophone, you can come back and you can play the saxophone. And so he went home and, Dad, please give me a saxophone. And at that time, yeah, that was a big thing, you know, because, you know, Willie was born in 1939. So, and the parents didn't have as much money as they would have liked at that time. But they sacrificed, and his dad sacrificed and got him saxophone. And that's how he got back into Mr. Lathen's favor and started back being taught under him.
Mrs. Akins shared how much Willie admired Walter Lathen.
He admired Mr. Lathen, so, you know, he always talked about how he was a great teacher, you know, and I think that influenced Willie a lot, you know, when, like I said, he learned a lot on the stages after he graduated in 1957 and moved to New York. He learned a lot, but I think he took a lot of that with him that he learned from Mr. Lathen, as far as no nonsense, as far as you gotta be really sincere about what you're doing and focused on what you're doing.
Lathen had been a part of Willie Akins' music education every step of the way, even through the transition from Douglas to Webster Groves High School with the integration of the schools. As a teenager, Lathen introduced Akins to a local trumpeter, Eddie Randall, whose band, the Blue Devils, was legendary in St. Louis. Miles Davis had played with Randall before he left East St. Louis for New York. Randall invited Akins to be a regular with the Blue Devils, which meant Akins started playing dance gigs all over the region.
But when Willie did, he said that he really enjoyed playing with them because they would play like for school dances and graduations, and then they would even venture out and play in clubs and different, you know, they play in different churches and different organizations throughout the Webster Groves area. And, you know, Willie liked that because at that time it got him in favor with the girls.
After Akins graduated high school, his dad drove him to New York City to follow his dreams and join the jazz scene. He was there for about 11 years and had slowly built a reputation. Unfortunately, he then got word that his father was sick, so he made the long move back to St. Louis.
You know, because that was the thing back in the 50s, the 40s, 50s, 60s. You know, New York was the place to go. So he already had that in his mind that when I graduate, I'm going to New York and play, you know. But when he got there, you know, the problem, he said he started out staying at the Salvation Army. And then one of his, I think it was on his father's side, one of his father's sisters lived there, but she had like 11 kids. And, you know, so he went from the Salvation Army to living with them until he can make enough money to get his own apartment, you know. And he said he would do little odd and end jobs in between playing in the evenings. You know, he would make deliveries and stuff for different companies, you know, to raise money that way.
Club in East St. Louis, he met the future Mrs. Sandra Akins.
Ed Nicholson, like I said, a few years before, Ed Nicholson was the jazz musician teacher at the high school I was going to at East St. Louis Senior High School. And so that's how I knew Ed. And then I got a gig at the Celebrity Room where Ed was working with Willie Akins. And that's how Willie and I first met. I admired the genius part in him, that he knew all of these tunes. You know, like I said, I thought the first time he asked me, what tune you want me to play, trying to impress me. You know, and I thought I was gonna really say something that he didn't even know. I said, Cry Me a River. And when most of the time, Willie would bring his soprano saxophone on the gigs, but he very seldom played it. And this particular time when I asked him to play that, instead of him playing it on the alto sax or tenor sax, he's really known for his tenor sax, he played it on the soprano sax. And I thought that was the most beautiful. Oh man, that really got my attention. Yeah.
In 1990, Akins started playing at Spruill's, a club in Midtown. He also played local jazz festivals and recorded a CD, but he was best known for 20-plus years of Saturday night gigs at Spruill's. He had a habit of bringing in young performers and giving them the spotlight to show off their talent.
Before Willie started teaching at Webster University, he taught at the Sunrise Academy in University City. He taught 4th and 5th graders. Yeah, awesome. And as these young men and women grew older and stayed in their trade, their parents would bring them to schools. You know, children could come, but they couldn't drink or anything like that. But so he would give them the opportunity to sit in, you know, on his different tunes and stuff. And of course, they would bring their friends from different places. And that's how Willie had become recognized as, you know, being one of the greatest to work with young musicians.
One young drummer, Montez Coleman, became a longtime member of the Willie Akins Quartet. Coleman was also very well known on the St. Louis jazz scene. Unfortunately, we lost Mr. Coleman in January of 2022. Mrs. Akins shared a story about Willie and Montez.
Willie was just like that. He was a perfectionist, and he liked things a certain way. And because he spent so much time in New York with other artists, he learned different things from them about how to make your group good. And Montez had this habit of being late. And that was one of Willie's pet peeves. He didn't like that. He wanted the band to be there on time, set up already. And when wherever he was playing, they say, okay, we hit at 8 o'clock. He wants to hit right at 8 o'clock. So this particular time, he came and the band was jamming. And he looked over there. Well, Willie has a habit of allowing other musicians to sit in on occasions, you know, to give them some exposure. So that's just what Montez felt like that's what it was. And so during the break, you know, he got ready to come up after the break and Willie told him, no, man. He said, I told you about being late. He said, now, Steve is my
don't know how to do that worksheet yet, honey.
Yeah. So
I don't know, I gotta read it. I don't know how to do it either.
His heart, feelings, and everything. But it didn't stop him from wanting to play with Willie Akins. And they went on to make CDs together and still do different performances after that.
In the 2000s, Akins came to Webster University to teach a music combo class. Over the 12 years he taught, he became known for pulling out his sax and jamming with the students. Joe Mancuso is an accomplished jazz vocalist who is one of Akins' students at Webster. Mancuso summed up Akins' legacy as follows. Willie influenced more than just music. He influenced lives. Willie gave so many performers their start on the scene without ever expecting anything in return. Willie taught me how to sacrifice, even if it meant laying my life to the side to help someone else. He was so incredibly selfless, anyone who knew him can attest to that. He left such a legacy in St. Louis that Mancuso and others in the music community established a Webster University scholarship in his honor, as well as an annual jazz festival to keep Akins' memory and music alive.
Joe just fell in love with Willie, and he often used Willie on some of the gigs that he had, you know, and this particular gig he had on September the 4th in 2015, Willie was scheduled to play, and he wasn't well enough to play. So that's when Joe found out that he was extremely ill and he didn't have much longer to live. So Joe started Willie Akins GoFundMe and raised funds for Willie. That was awesome. So I can't thank the many people that contributed to that fund. His fans, other musicians, family, friends from all over the United States and abroad, you know, contributed to that. And I just don't feel like I can thank them enough for doing that at that particular time.
We hope you all enjoyed that. And real quickly, I would be remiss if I do not mention that besides Farrell and myself, we had two special assistant narrators, our sophomores, Sloan Carfield and Soroya Williams. So we throw that in there. Is Mr. Mancuso here?
Yes, I am. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
As you can tell, we totally stole a couple of pictures off of your website.
No, that's fine.
Hope you don't
Those are some good. I look better there than I do here.
And Keita, I got to interrupt because make sure Joe tells you who's with him, because the legacy is another generation with Willie.
Oh, yes, please.
Well, this is my daughter Kayla. She's also a vocalist and has her own band, and but I studied at Webster before Willie was actually a professor there, but I got my schooling from Willie on the stage, and he taught me a lot, and a lot of things he taught me I can't repeat here, but but she had classes with Willie at Webster, so we both have degrees in jazz from Webster. So it's really kind of cool, because when I was a 20-something running around town chasing Willie and watching him play around town, I was just in awe of him, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. And I knew his story. I never thought I'd ever perform with him, and years later I got to do that, and I have great stories about that. But then she went to Webster, graduated 2017, and she had a bunch of classes with Willie, and yeah, so it's kind of cool. Yeah.
That is super awesome. What was he like as a professor at Webster?
So I had Willie as a not as a combo director, but he was one of our jazz masterclass teachers, where we had bands at Webster, and we would perform in the master class, and we would get critiques from the various professors. So I had a few critiques from Willie. I was never in his band personally, but I came to Webster very green. I didn't decide to start pursuing music till about halfway through my senior year of high school, and took a few lessons, got in barely. And then my first few master classes were a little bit of a train wreck. And some of the professors danced around that and they're like, oh, well, you're getting your footing. You'll figure it out. Willie did not sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
I remember it was my second ever masterclass performance at Webster University. I sang The Days of Wine and Roses, and it was in a key that was not suitable for my voice, but I had a guitar player who didn't want to change the key. And I ended up just totally messing that song up and not hitting a lot of my pitches. At the end of the performance, Willie said, well, the guitar player did pretty well. The drums were all right. The vocals were annoying, though. I could have done without the vocalist. And that kind of lit a fire under me to really push myself these next few combos. And I started speaking up to the professors when they would, a lot of times they just dictate what key we are going to do, what song we are going to do. And I was like, no, I'm the singer. I'm not going to sing in a key that doesn't work for me. I'm not going to sing a song that doesn't work for me. And, started speaking up a little bit because I'm like, I'm not letting that happen in front of all these people again. So the next time I performed in front of our master class, I actually got a compliment from Willie.
Yeah.
And
I was there.
yeah, you were there for that one. And then I went on to perform at a few of the Willie Akins festivals that my dad put together a few years after that. Yeah.
That is awesome. Joe, what was it like to perform with Mr. Akins?
Willie was, well, one thing I could say about Willie is that his sound was so beautiful. There are a lot of great musicians, saxophone players in St. Louis, and some of them can just really play incredibly. They're virtuosos, but nobody had the sound of Willie. I mean, Willie was an extremely, talented player as well, but his horn sounded like you were listening to a record. It was just beautiful, warm, full, sounded like it had its own, production behind it. It was just beautiful. You could tell that was Willie. And there's guys in town that, like I said, play great, but they're a little harsh, a little, sometimes even irritating, but they're great players. Willie just sounded beautifully. But Willie taught me to go with my instincts. We did a show at the Sheldon one time, and it was in 2013. It was only like the second or third time I ever played with Willie. And I was doing all jazz standards, just standards. And then I wanted to start doing some pop tunes. And I wanted to do Georgia on My Mind, which is, Ray Charles did that song beautifully. It's a Hoagie Carmichael tune. It really is kind of a standard, but it's more of like a pop, pop tune. And the piano player said, no, don't play that, or let's not do that. And Willie said, hey, if you want to do Georgia, you do Georgia. Kind of like, you're the boss, you're the band leader. If that's what you feel, you do it. And we did that, and it was recorded, and it got such a huge response because I felt invigorated and encouraged because Willie said, yeah, you do that. That recording from the Sheldon got me so much work because it's on YouTube and you could Google it. That whole concert's on YouTube. And then, so one other thing I want to say about Willie is that when he critiqued you in a way that maybe embarrassed you, it just did that. It lit a fire under you, and he didn't sugarcoat things. And we did a gig in Alton one night, and I was just beginning to get comfortable with scatting on stage. And this was like in 2014, maybe. And I scatted on a couple of tunes. And after the gig, I go, hey, Willie, what'd you think about my scatting? And he kind of looked at me and he smiled, and he just started laughing. Basically, that meant you need to go to the woodshed and work on that. And I have. And, I think people appreciate my scatting now. But yeah, anyway.
That's awesome. Is there going to be a fundraiser this year? Will there be? I know COVID's kind of marking.
I've been doing an annual fundraiser, and I decided at the beginning of last year that I'm not doing that until the whole COVID thing is over with. But what I decided to do was do a monthly concert because the annual show was costing me about $4,500 to produce. And by the time I got sponsors and paid everybody, and I only had maybe $1,700, $1,500 to donate, I decided this is not going to work. I started a scholarship at Webster in his name to perpetuate, to make Willie's name stay alive forever. And I decided we're going to do a show every month. The venues are going to donate their time or their space. The musicians are going to donate them their time, and every single penny is going into the fund. When I was supposed to raise $25,000 in 5 years, at the beginning of this year, I was at $6,500. We reached it. In December, we hit $26,000.
Wow, that is awesome. That is
So
awesome.
that formula works a lot better.
Yeah.
So I've taken a couple of months off here this February. I'm going to probably start back up in March and April, and I'm going to go once a month. And I've got 7 or 8 groupings of combos, people who love Willie, who said, we'll play for you once a year at no cost. I've got several venues. So I'm going to try to, my goal is before I'm gone, I want that fund to have $1 million in it, because
Awesome.
Webster University changed my life. And I've got a great story that we don't have time for, but much like the previous student talked about how that piece of cake changed his life, that's how Webster changed my life. And I thought, Willie was such an idol of mine and such a great influence on the stage that I believe that his name should live on forever, because if he didn't come home to take care of his mom and his dad, he could have been a big name in New York. And many of his students have become big names because he came back to St. Louis and shared his knowledge and raised all these kids from the stage to become big stars. Yeah.
That is awesome. How can I see a couple questions are coming up in the chat? How can people donate to the fund? And is there a calendar or something that we can maybe keep track of the performances?
Yes. I got a link here that I could share.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
I'll put it in that's the fun. I have a website. Did that work? Yeah. I have a website that's willieakins.com, and it was forwarding to that website that I just shared with everybody. But for some reason, the host that's in charge of that quad website, they're not allowing forwards from other domains from GoDaddy. So what I'm going to do is, I also am a web developer. I'm going to now make a website at willieakins.com. I've got great video from all these shows I've done, photos of Willie's last gig that I'm on, and I'm going to make that site. And the main call to action is going to be to donate. It's just going to forward there. So you could go there now, and then in the future, go to willieakins.com or mancusojazz.com.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Errol, I'll defer to you. Do we have a moment? I know it's a little bit after 8. Do we have time for any more questions or anything?
Well, sure. I'd say, people, we want to honor your time. So if you need to bow out, but we'll hang on for, another 5 or 6 minutes just to make sure, in case we can get some questions in. I also am going to repost the links from the top on the upcoming events. And just know that as far as Mr. Mancuso's links, we will do a newsletter, how we always send out a summary of the meeting, and we'll make sure that stuff is in there so that you guys can donate if you don't really feel like leaving here to go there at the very moment. We'll make sure that gets circulated. And I got a direct message saying, just to recap that, Keita helped me out, just to sort of recap our goal in this meeting was to just capture local Black educators and local Black excellence, make sure those stories stay alive here. And that reminds me to plug the fact that some of us have been, including Keita and Elissa and other Alliance friends, have really been trying to get a project off the ground to make sure this information gets into our schools. You might recall we hosted a Made by History event, that's what we call that project, a couple of years ago, and just to collect oral histories and get all these materials in one place that it's easy for our public school teachers to grab, like a one-stop shop for all the cool Webster history that we can collect. So just know that that's like a slow burning project that Keita is constantly fueling, and we're wishing we could have a website and maybe get a grant to really put that stuff out there in a more accessible way. That's just a goal of ours. But Keita, yeah, lead us in seeing if we can grab any questions.
Were there any in the chat? I kind of wasn't. Does anyone have any questions for any of our guests, Mr. Glover or Dr. Quinn or Mr. Mancuso?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Kia, and it's a real fundamental, basic one, but to Joe and everybody that's coming in this amazing program, the question is simply, why is music important and of value to the world and its people? Why is music important and of value to the world? I'd be really curious as to your thinking and your thoughts.
I could sure take a stab at answering that, but we need another hour. Music is one of those things that is in all of our lives, whether we realize it or not. And the importance of music in pretty much every aspect of our life. You know, we can't imagine a life without music because it's so omnipresent. It's everywhere. It's in our TV shows and movies. It's in the car when we go somewhere. We listen at home. It enhances our mood in different areas. Learning to play an instrument or learning to sing is not something that you can do in an hour or two, like figure out a video game. You know, and that's one of the challenges that kids have today when they study music. It's worth investing the time to master something and to learn how to do it. And there's obviously a sense of accomplishment that can come with that. But I've noticed that I have a lot of friends who were music majors in college who have gone on to very distinguished careers in other areas because the skills that they developed as a musician have really served them well in life and in other careers. Playing in an ensemble, playing in a band or an orchestra, or singing in a choir, you learn a lot more than music if it's done right. You learn like teamwork and helping each other and doing your part and working well with others, and so many skills that that are life skills that you don't really think about when you think of music. So, you know, it's a little hard to explain. And I know that when a lot of time when educators, or I should say administrators, talk about curriculum, you know, they focus on the basics, and sometimes music is kind of not considered as important. But, you know, I know at Webster for many years, kids going into the Steger sixth grade center, when it was still the sixth grade center, had a choice between band, orchestra, or chorus. And I think that was wonderful. You know, give them a chance to do it for a year. And some of them are going to like it and stick with it, and some of it aren't. But to give them a chance to participate is something that could just open up a whole lifetime of opportunity. So that's kind of my sermon about why music's important.
Great, thank you very much.
If it's okay, I would like to add to that real quickly that a lot of times when you think about a global situation, we have, obviously, sometimes we have a language barrier where we don't know how to speak another language or what have you, but music, to me, music speaks to everyone's soul, and we can all communicate through music. And when we hear it, it does something to us, and that we don't have verbally, if that makes sense. Yes, I think it's a diamond in the rough.
I just wanted to say really quick, if I can, I know we're running out of time. Music, I think, is so special. It's one of the most incredible things that we have, I think, in this life. Music cannot exist without time, if you think about it. Music is vibration. And it's a vibration that physically hits your body, and it travels linear through time, and it makes you feel emotion. It makes you it's sort of like a mental massage. It's like you're being touched by these vibrations, and as we go through time, music can be interpreted by so many different people in so many different ways. It's you know, it's sort of supernatural, and some people take to music and it becomes their life and they're consumed by it. And I'm one of those people. I don't think I could live without music. So that's my take on it.
I am taking nothing else from this evening, Joe. I'm taking the words mental massage with me.
This whole meeting was a mental massage, in my opinion.
I want to add just one real quick thing. If you're ever out at a restaurant or a nightclub or someplace where there's live music being played or sung or what have you, and the piano player or the quartet or whoever is performing has a little tip jar over there, go put something in that before you leave, because those people are never paid enough, and being a gigging musician is just a lot of hard work. And you never know who's going to be sitting there in that group. It could be a Walter Lathen or a Miles Davis or somebody that's going to be famous someday, and they need your help and support. So thank you.
And if I could just add something for Joe. Joe, if you're looking for concert places, please check out the Webster Groves Garden Cafe. They put on Friday, Saturday concerts, spring through fall in the back, and they're wonderful. And it's free. The bands play for free, but their tip jars out every night. You would be a great addition.
I've thought of reaching out to them, and some of my friends play there, and I will definitely check it out.
Great.
Yeah.
Joe, did I see on your calendar that you're performing somewhere tomorrow? Am I correct about that?
I think so. What is it? Saturday? Is it Saturday?
Oh, Saturday.
Oh, yeah, I am. I forgot.
Don't forget.
Good thing it wasn't tonight. Or wait, no,
it's Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday the 18th.
So is it Friday or Saturday?
I don't know when you're going.
I'm playing.
Oh, wait,
I play every
you sent
third.
me the picture.
Yes,
I play every third weekend at this place called Lit Cigar Lounge, and it's either a Friday or a Saturday. And when we get off of this, I'm going to confirm. But maybe
Friday.
you're right.
You're on
Friday?
Friday.
Okay,
Yes.
so yes. The answer is yes. I'm
Okay.
at Lit Cigar Lounge in Chesterfield, Missouri. Me and
Okay.
Mr. Dave Black, who teaches at Webster University.
Yes.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Thank you for reminding me.
Oh, you're welcome. I was trying to invite people out to see you, so make sure you're there.
Thank you so much, Keita. I'm just interrupting to say you're amazing. So much work. I loved it.
I have amazing subjects. They pretty much wrote themselves. So, and thank you to our guests, Mr. Glover and Dr. Quinn and Mr. Mancuso and Miss Mancuso. Is it Miss Mancuso? Okay. Thank you guys. And thank you so much for sharing your stories and your thoughts. They did nothing but add to the very little that I did. So thank you so much for being here. And thanks for everyone else for joining us.
My
Be
pleasure.
warm, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
God
you all.
bless you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Good night, everyone.